All right, and it's 23 minutes past 8. Now, Joy Doringa joins us to discuss this, extraterrestrial activities,
That's
Venus and Mars. Please.
I just don't understand how Arabic is one of the most used languages on Twitter. Like, how often do you see a tweet in Arabic?
And the same way, Chinese is the most spoken language in the world.
Well, I guess it has something to do with the population.
Absolutely.
But then you're actually running away from this discussion. Men are from Mars and women are from Venus. How long do you take to understand me? Because I'm a woman, you're a man.
I don't try to understand you, Joy.
Oh, you're still trying to?
No, I don't.
I guess you will not.
I don't try. I let it be.
Well, and that's our discussion this morning with relationships expert Chris Hart, who is here to delve into men are from Mars, women are from Venus. But the thing about men is that they never even want to take time to understand women. And I guess that is where partly the problem is. But Chris Hart, welcome to the show. It's good to have you on Lifestyle Wednesdays. Now, of course, men are from Mars, women are from Venus. We've all read the book. I don't know if my friend over there has read Men are from Mars and Women are from Venus. But, well, let's just get into it. How would you describe the relationship between men and women, knowing that we cannot even do without each other, yet we just never get to understand ourselves?
Well, I think the problem is this. The idea in the last 50 years or so has been that men and women are supposed to be identical. It's become a politically correct idea. And I think that's actually caused a lot of confusion, because if you asked your great-grandmother, she would say, men, completely different from women. Everybody accepted it.
Yes.
I think the problem is that men and women go into relationships for the difference between them. And because they are then confused, thinking that they ought to behave identically and think identically and have the same values and so on, a lot of confusion arises. So actually, we should rejoice in the differences between men and women and understand them.
Yes. Well, but in trying to understand them, it seems like we always tend to agree to disagree and, leave it at that and say, we'll never understand this bit, we'll never understand that part. But which are the most reasons for misunderstanding,
I think
at the different sexes?
The biggest cause of misunderstanding is the fact that men and women use language differently. I mean, obviously they're using the same language, but if you listen to a bunch of men in a bar conversing, and then you lean over and listen to a bunch of women, everybody knows that they talk differently.
Yes.
I mean, men, for example, one man speaks at a time, and he holds center stage until he's knocked off his perch. And a man's sentences always have a subject, a verb, and an object, and lots of full stops. Now listen to women. You'll have 3 or 4 speaking at once, endless commas and subordinate clauses, and changing the subject in the middle of the sentence.
Yeah.
Men and women use language differently. And classic is that women tend to put commands and wishes into requests and questions, and men find that very confusing. So, for example, imagine I'm sitting at home and you walk in and you say, would you like to go out tonight?
Yes.
Being male, you see, my brain says she's asking me if I want to go out. And I've got the football.
And that's your role.
But you see, she's asking me if I want to go out.
Yes.
She doesn't actually mean that. Any woman knows that would you like to go out tonight is actually a command. Take me out. Men and women hear it differently.
Yes. And what do we make out of that? Is it that men, I don't want to use the word slow, because that would be personal, but is it that men just don't understand when a woman says something indirectly but she means something else? At what point does the man try to read between the lines and say, okay, would you like to go out tonight to go for?
Sure, a skillful man will do that. But then what we're saying is that there is a skill to be learned in exactly the same way, for example, as a woman needs to understand how men process language and how, for example, men deal with stress and how men deal with arguments, different to women. So you get endless women saying, oh, my man won't talk about things, he won't discuss this, that or the other. And the reason is that when you ambush a man with a problem, he wants to sit and think about it. Well, of course, the woman, by contrast, wants to talk about it. Now you've got a conflict just about the fact that he wants to process the problem in his style and she wants to process it in his. But a woman, again, who understands how men process information would say, okay, she'd come in, she'd say to her man, hey, I want us to talk about this, that and the other. How about we talk about it tomorrow? You know what I mean? Now she's giving him a few hours to think it through, and he will come to the discussion in a completely different frame of mind.
But what happens when, how about we talk about it tomorrow, turns into a week, it goes all the way to a month,
no, one of the
and goes to 3 months?
Sure, but that's one of the things that couples have to learn to do, is they have to learn to manage diaries. They have to learn to have agreements about how they argue. I mean, for example, men hate being ambushed. So I suggest to couples that they have argument-free zones, like you're not allowed to raise arguments in the bedroom or on the sofa because they're intimate areas.
Right.
So if I'm sitting on the sofa, my wife can't ambush me. If she wants to have an argument with me, she's got to get her diary out and say, let's talk about it 10 o'clock tomorrow night. And then we will sit at the dining room table because that's where we argue. Now we will have a proper argument, and I've had plenty of time to think about it, so we will discuss it. And that's one of the skills couples have to learn.
So let me try to understand. There are specific spots in the house that are intimate and do not deserve to be brought an argument onto. For instance, we sit on a couch, and I'm thinking there are certain issues we can talk about, and there's some we cannot talk about. We cannot move certain conversations to the bedroom.
Sure.
So kitchen, bedroom, couch, where exactly do certain conversations happen?
The intimate parts of the house should be safe from arguments, from ambushes. So I know that if I'm going into the bedroom, only nice things happen in bedrooms, only nice things happen on sofas. That should be the rule. If you want to have an argument, have it in one of the more business-like parts of the house, like the dining room table, or go out to a coffee shop or wherever, but don't argue in the places where you need to feel safe together.
Right. Now, let's talk about how to improve relationships, knowing that maybe sometimes there's a communication problem in a relationship. How do two people work this out to get to a point where they can understand each other without really fully understanding each other, but at least they can understand the basics?
The thing is this, you have to start from an understanding that despite political theories, men and women are different. And as a matter of fact, that's the real reason why we love one another. We like the differences between us. And the trick is to start a relationship with an understanding of those differences and not make the biggest mistake of all, which is instantly to start trying to change your partner into a carbon copy of yourself. That's what an awful lot of people do. So, for example, men's values are different from women's values. Now, make that a strength in your relationship. Don't make it into a weakness. And yet you hear lots and lots of women trying to change men's values. Now, it's not worth attempting. You shouldn't try. So accept that men behave certain ways, women behave certain ways. Men have certain ways of looking at the world, and women have certain ways of looking at the world, in exactly the same way as they use language differently. Now, once you've accepted that and started to see it as something interesting to study and understand and make the best of, all of a sudden it becomes exciting and fun instead of frustrating and irritating.
Right. Now, I sometimes tend to think that men love to keep stuff inside of them and then bring it out maybe after 3 months or something. So he'll just let it pile up. And then at some point, you know, the woman would be talking by this time. She's all trying to find answers to certain things. She starts to make conclusions. And then at the end of it all, the answer comes in after 3 months. So when someone is faced with a partner who doesn't bring out certain information firsthand, what is a woman expected to do here?
That's actually not a male versus female issue. Some people don't like conflict. They don't bring up issues. Other people are very much get it out on the table instantly. And the difference in the two genders arises in the way that they do that. Assuming that both tend to bring things out, what tends to happen is that women want to discuss the whole issue at great length from many different points of view. In other words, they keep looking at the whole problem from this point of view, from that point of view. They apparently keep changing the subject, which frustrates men no end. What men prefer to do is to present a solution. They say, here's a problem and here's the solution. Women, of course, hate that. They don't like being short-circuited.
We definitely hate that.
And I'm forever telling men, don't give women advice. You know, ask them what they think. And eventually, a skillful man will get his way. He will, you know, say, oh, that's a good idea, picking one of hers, you know, when it was his in the first place.
Well, so when we're dealing with, as we come to a conclusion, when we're dealing with emotional feelings, at what point do we see a problem? When people are failing to express themselves in a way that they should express themselves, and then it causes a problem somewhere, somehow. So I'll look at this from the perspective of where a gentleman or a man would like to ask a certain woman out, but he doesn't know what right words to use, especially now that times have changed, you know. Even when you are trying to get someone onto your side, you need to be cautious of what language you're using. And so how do we get to understand the emotional feelings of both sides?
Well, it depends where you are in your life and in your relationship. You know, what you do at 18 in a club and a bar is neither here nor there. But when you get to the point where you are wanting to find a spouse, by that time you really ought to understand the different ways that men and women look at life. I mean, for example, men are very much more focused on their work. I mean, to the exclusion of almost everything else. You must have noticed that. How many women do you know who complain about the hours that their men work and so on? So by the time you get to the point of wanting to speak to one another with matrimony in mind, you must understand all these issues. You must understand the way that men and women see the world and understand the way their language is operating. And if you do that, of course, you're going to be very successful. I mean, I can't think of anything more attractive in a man than a man who actually understands how women see the world.
Right.
He instantly forms a rapport with them. And the same goes for women, of course. A man is hugely impressed by a woman who gets it, who understands the difference between a man's life and a woman's life, for example. I mean, take a silly example. Men feel a huge amount more competition than women do. Women, to be honest, women do not feel anything like as competitive as men do. Men are evilly competitive. Now, a woman who doesn't understand that...
But I think from the men's point of view, it has something to do with their ego, don't you think?
No, I think it's the way they've been brought up. If you look at the way boys treat each other in the schoolyard, for example, you can see that even at the age of 3 and 4 and 5, they are hugely competitive to one another in a way where groups of girls in a playground don't behave like that. And the same thing goes through all the way through their upbringing. Boys are very, very hard on one another. I'm not saying that women aren't, but there's an order of magnitude difference. You know, men are much harder on one another. Men will stab each other in the back any time of the day or night. It's one of the reasons why men have so few male friends, because you don't trust men.
Well, someone here makes a comment and says, you know, you keep saying that men will not understand women anytime soon, but women hardly understand themselves.
I don't know what that person means. I think it's perfectly possible for men and women to understand one another. But they have to start from the idea that they are different. That because they're different, you've got to look at your lady friend and say, how is she seeing this? Not, why isn't she seeing it like I do? Because the chances are she does not see it like you do, and the same in reverse. So if you start from the idea that she has to behave like I want, or he has to behave like I want, then things are not going to work out. But if you start from the perspective of, I think she sees the world differently from me, and I must try and understand it, now that's going to work in a relationship.
All right. Now let's look at the good side. The good side of men are from Mars and women are from Venus. What are some of the advantages that come with us just being different?
Well, in a traditional setting, of course, you get men really getting a huge kick out of their competence and ability to perform and their focus on work. If you maximize that, of course, you're going to have a prosperous relationship. Typically, women want to be much more balanced between family and work and so on. And if they do that, you're going to have a successful relationship. Now imagine a relationship where each is fighting their own corner, determined to be the one who's the breadwinner and so on.
Right.
Frankly, it's going to be a tussle all the way along. So you have to ask yourself, am I finding a partner who has got a set of values, not that are identical to mine, but that are compatible with mine? And when you've done that, you're going to have a very successful relationship.
Right. And as I tend to think, a lot of people here who are, tweeting about this, men are from Mars and women are from Venus, are saying women just never get to understand what goes on in a man's mind. This one is coming in from George.
Right. There's a lot of truth in that. I mean, we all make the mistake, both men and women, of not studying our partners enough. We enjoy getting to know them in the early parts of courtship, but pretty soon in a marriage we tend to start taking them for granted. And we can't get past this idea that they should agree with us, that they should do things the way we do. You should study your partner on the basis that they are different, even down to really trivial things. Men and women drive cars differently. Men and women approach work differently. Men and women enjoy different activities. Men, for example, are fascinated by anything that involves spatial awareness, like kicking a ball and being intercepted. It's not an accident that men are fascinated by football. Women, on the other hand, are fascinated by manipulating language. They love messing around with language and turning it into complicated things, which men don't do. So, of course, endless confusion, because a woman will put something in a complicated and polite way, whereas a man would say, take the trash out, you know.
Okay, that's interesting. But then at what point do we get to say, you know what, I think this is what he meant. He just said, take the trash out. And that's what he really meant, take the trash out and not anything else.
Yeah, that's what you have to do. I mean, I hear lots of ladies saying, I'm not sure whether he loves me. And then she tells me how he's been saying this and saying that. And I'm saying, I think I heard him say, I don't love you. I want you to go away. And you're not hearing it. So one of the things ladies should always do is assume that men speak very directly. So that if a man is saying something like, I need some time to myself, or you should find somebody else to go out with, he's really saying, I'm not that into you, go away. And there are no ambiguities there. There are no subtleties, there are no hints. He's saying, shoo, go away.
Wow. Well, in case you're watching, I hope you're really trying to internalize some of these things that Chris Hart is saying. But you've talked to a lot of people, and in these sessions that you have with them, there are a number of issues that they do mention about what irritates them about their partners on both sides. Which are some of the top reasons that people do mention when it comes to that situation?
Okay. One is the thing we were talking about earlier, argument styles. Men tend to want to sit and think about something before they talk about it. Women find that very difficult to deal with. Another one is that when men have dealt with an issue, it's over. So if they have a row with their wife at lunchtime, they think they're going to have a nice time in the evening. But a woman will bring it up for 3, 6 or 8 months. Women keep on processing things for much longer. Another one that causes immense difficulty is that women need to be loved and cherished, but what men need is to be needed. So if you ever say to a man, I don't need you, you've just absolutely killed him stone dead. You might just be trying to, you know, annoy him a little bit, but actually you've struck at the heart of his soul. So you must say to a man how important he is.
The ladies do enjoy that, don't they?
Oh, yes. Yes, absolutely. But men must cherish their wives, and wives must make their men feel important in the relationship, important to the relationship. What the men bring to the relationship, like paying the rent, actually matters to them a huge amount. And if you don't respect them for it, then of course they actually feel belittled. The worst thing you can do is say, pay the rent. Well, that's just your job. It's not part of the relationship. Yes, it is to a man.
So, what is whose job at any one point?
You know, the curious thing is that the old traditional roles are actually how we are programmed to do relationships. So, for example, a man who is vacuuming the carpet and doing the dishes is sort of viewed by a woman as something less than a man. It's quite curious that if you investigate what men's and women's lives are like, you find that they are much more intimate and much more sexual where they have traditional roles. And it's not about coercion or anything like that. It is that women find men who are doing the outside work and all the rest of it much more sexy than the guy who's busy cleaning up the magazines.
Well, interesting session we've had here with Chris Hart. Thank you so much for inviting us on Men Are From Mars and Women Are From Venus.